In this video, I'm here to talk about a device that I believe is absolutely essential for all fish keepers, all aquarium hobbyists to have on their aquariums. This is going to be the Aquarium Temperature Controller. So if you're like me, you keep tropical fish. A lot of us do. Those are some of the best fish to keep. You know, they're from tropical regions, whether it's Africa, whether it's South America, whether it's maybe some warmer parts of Asia. Your fish are tropical. They want to be in aquariums that are maybe in the 75 to 90 degree temperature range, and the room you're keeping them in is probably lower than that unless you heat your entire room. So what we then have to do is use heaters in our aquariums to maintain that temperature, to keep them healthy, to keep them happy. So if you're like me, you might have gotten into the hobby and started using aquarium heaters, and you thought to yourself, oh, these devices seem, very reliable. I've never had an issue with them. I've used them for a few years. My temperatures in my tanks are always spot on. My fish seem happy. And then one morning, you might wake up to all your fish, floating, either because the temperature in the tank has reached 95 degrees and it was like that all night, or, it was below 60 degrees all night. Maybe it's wintertime, your house got a little cold, and your heaters just stopped working. Heaters fail, and they fail more often than you would think. And a lot of times we're lulled into this false sense of security and safety with heaters because, we've used them for a few years and they've worked perfectly until they don't. And then we lose a lot of fish that we really care about that might be worth a lot of money. This is where the Aquarium Temperature Controller comes into play, and more specifically, the one I'm going to be talking about today is the Inkbird ITC 308 Wi-Fi model with the aquarium probe. And that last bit there, the aquarium probe bit, is important because they do sell some with probes that are not coated in the way that the aquarium probe is, and they're not really made to be in water. They're made for other applications, so you need to make sure you get the right one. And I'll link this one in the video description, but this is the one I have been using for years. This is the one I love. This is probably the most common one you're going to see in the aquarium hobby. The Inkbirds are very popular among aquarium hobbyists, and for good reason. They're very good quality. Like I said, I've been using them for years, never had a single issue, and I use them on all my tanks. I'm actually making this video today because I had them on 4 of my tanks, and I'm finally upgrading and putting them on the other 5 tanks. I will admit I was not, practicing what I preach for maybe the last couple of years, but I finally did it, and I finally got the extra 5 I needed. So now all 9 of my aquariums will have a heater and an aquarium temperature controller that is actually controlling that heater. And what I love most about these temperature controllers is really just the simplicity in them. There's not a lot of moving parts to them in the sense that, it's just something that you're really going to buy once and probably have for a very long time. They fail very rarely. And they're just so easy to kind of understand and use. You plug in the temperature controller, and then the temperature controller has 2 outlets that come out of it. One is labeled heating and one is labeled cooling. You would plug your aquarium heater into that outlet for heating, and then if you have maybe fans or an aquarium chiller, you'd plug that into the cooling outlet. And then you place your heater or your chiller inside the aquarium, and with the heaters at least, I don't use chillers so I can't really speak to those too much, but with the heaters, you would set your heater to a temperature on the heater itself, not on the controller, that is maybe 3 degrees higher than the temperature you're trying to maintain. So, for example, my aquariums, I try to keep them in the 83 to 84 temperature range for my Hypensistris. It's kind of a tight window, but that's what I do. So I would set my heaters on the little dial on the heater itself to 87. I'm setting it to a temperature that's higher than what we want. And then I would place it in the aquarium, and the last thing you do is you put the probe in the aquarium. The probe's got to go into the aquarium as well and make sure it's not right up against the heater so that it's, giving you a false reading. You want it to kind of have some distance from the heater a little bit so that it can give you a more realistic temperature of the tank water and not just the water that's right up against the heater. Now you might be asking yourself, if we want to maintain a temperature of 83 to 84 degrees for Hypensistris in the tank, why did we set the heater temperature to 87? Basically, we are going to put in that temperature range of 83 to 84 in the temperature controller, and what the heater is going to do is we're not going to be relying on the thermometer inside the heater, because the heaters do have a thermometer inside them. That's how they kind of gauge if they've done their job enough and if they should turn off or if they should keep heating. But in this case, we trust the data that we're getting from the Inkbird more than we trust the temperature data that we're getting from the heater itself. So we want the temperature controller to be the first fail-safe, and we want the heater to be the second fail-safe. Now, the temperature controller is controlling the power that goes to the heater, and because we set the heater at 87 and the temperature controller is fighting to maintain a temperature of 83 to 84, and anytime it gets to 84, it's going to cut the power to the heater is just always going to turn on when the Inkbird supplies it with power because the tank will always be less than 87. Now, the heater is a second failsafe because if on some very rare occasion the Inkbird should continue to supply power to the heater even beyond 84 degrees, once the tank reaches 87 degrees, even though the heater is still getting power from the Inkbird, the heater should, in theory, turn itself off because the dial on the heater was set to 87 and the heater's internal thermometer is telling it, hey, the tank's too warm, I can stop heating now. So to just kind of circle back real quick to the setup process, you plugged in the temperature controller and then you plugged your heater into the outlet that comes out of the temperature controller. You put your heater in the aquarium, you set your heater temperature on the heater itself to be maybe 3 degrees higher than what you're going to set on the Inkbird, and then you've also put the probe in the aquarium. You're then going to go on the temperature controller, and if you have the Wi-Fi model, you do it all from your phone. And you're going to set the value that you want. So like I said, I set my temperature range from 83 to 84. And you're also going to set a low temperature and a high temperature alarm. So for mine, I think I set the low temperature alarm at 75 degrees and the high temperature alarm at 90 degrees. And because the Wi-Fi model is connected to your home's Wi-Fi, you'll get an alert on your phone no matter where you are. You don't have to be home on your Wi-Fi. I could be at work, and if something, went bad and my temperatures on my aquariums got below 75 or above 90, I'll get an alert right away on my phone, as well as the actual temperature controller emitting a loud alarm. And it's pretty loud. I can hear it from the second floor of my house, and the aquariums are in the basement, so it emits a good amount of sound in person, but you'll also get that notification right away on your phone. And you might be scratching your head saying, you said these things were very reliable, Nick, so how is it that you would ever even need to get an alarm? It has happened to me twice, and I can explain the situation, and both times it was not a heater failure, and it was not a temperature controller failure. The first time was at a previous house where I had an aquarium upstairs, and the house did not have air conditioning upstairs. And on one or two very, very hot summer days, the temperatures upstairs actually, exceeded 90 degrees, and my tank water, even with the heater being off, exceeded 90 degrees. So the alarm was warning me, hey, your tank water is over 90 degrees, but it wasn't because of the heater, because the heater wasn't on. The Inkbird was not supplying the heater with power. It was just the temperature of the room got so high that it was able to heat the tank above 90 degrees. The other instance, and I've done this one a few times now, was where I've left on the water change system on overnight. And if you've seen the video on my water change system, it's a drip system. It drips cold water, but I do it in intervals throughout the day, so the cold water never really drops the temperature in the tanks more than a degree or two. But if I accidentally leave it on, then it will outpace the heater. So in that situation, the Inkbird was telling the heater to stay on, and the heater was staying on, but the cold water was just dripping in too fast, and it was lowering the temperature faster than the heaters could raise the temperature. And because I opted for the Wi-Fi model, I was able to act very promptly in both situations. Even though I wasn't home, I was able to go home and add some colder water to that very hot aquarium, and I was able to, in the other instances, shut off the water change system that either got stuck on or I forgot to turn it off. So that's why I would recommend spending the little bit of extra for the Wi-Fi model. The Wi-Fi model, I think, is around $53, and the non-Wi-Fi model, where you would just set it all up on the device itself, and then you just have to listen for the alarm. That's the only way you'd get notified in person. That model, I think, sells for around $37, $38. And they do actually run sales from time to time. I did see them, I think there was like 20% off on Amazon this past Prime Day. So you could look for that too if you needed to buy a couple of them. They do run some pretty good sales. And you can also, one thing I forgot to mention too, is you can also check the real-time temperature of your aquarium from anywhere if you're using the Wi-Fi model. And then if you're using the non-Wi-Fi model, you can just look on the controller itself. Obviously, that's not super helpful to you. If you set a tight range like me of 83 to 84, you know it's always going to be 83 point something, so I don't usually need to check the temperature unless I get an alarm, but you can if you want to. And what I love most about these things is they're almost entirely maintenance-free. I mean, you see some of the ones in my tanks, and they might have some calcium buildup on the probe itself, but what you're looking at is literally like 2 to 3 years worth of calcium buildup. And even then, I still check my readings to make sure they're accurate. I check them with a digital laser thermometer, and I also check it with the magnetic thermometers that are on each of my tanks, and they're always spot on still, even with that little bit of calcium on there. I mean, that would probably take me like 60 seconds to clean with a sponge. I just haven't gotten around to it. But even with that calcium you see on there, they're still, coming up spot on for the temperature that the probe is giving the Inkbird. So I'm going to try to kind of wrap it up here. I didn't expect this video to go past 10 minutes, but I can really ramble on about these things because I just think they're so essential to the fish keeper, to the aquarium hobbyist, because how many devices like this are just so easy and set it and forget it type of things. And really, if you have expensive fish, it's just the investment you need to make. I mean, your whole tank setup probably cost a few hundred, so $50 isn't really going to break the bank compared to what you set up. And if you have multiple tanks, you have a breeding operation like mine, it's a business decision. It's just a smart business decision. I'm managing my risk. I will now never have to worry about the effects of a thermometer failure, of a heater failure, I should say. I've never experienced something like that since I started using these Inkbirds, and I probably never will. And honestly, even if you just have one small 20-gallon aquarium with a couple of cories or a couple of hatchet fish or glass cats or, whatever it might be, whatever tropical fish you might have, how much do you like those fish? Have you grown attached to those fish? Maybe you've watched them grow over the last few years. Would $50 be worth it to save them from dying? I hate to be morbid like that, but heaters do fail. And unfortunately, usually the way you found out that they are ready to go bad is they did go bad and they, did something bad. Either they stopped working and the tank got too cool, or usually what is worse is, they worked too hard and they heated up the tank to a very bad temperature and cooked your fish. So anyways, I'll put the links in the video description for the Wi-Fi model, and I'll put the link to the non-Wi-Fi model as well. Like I said, definitely would recommend the Wi-Fi model so you can get the alerts wherever you are and you can act upon them pretty quick if something outside of the control of the heater and the Inkbird should cause your temperature to go too high or too low, like those examples that I gave. You can get alerted wherever you are. But I'll put those links in the video description. If you have some experience with the Inkbird temperature controllers or just temperature controllers in general and you want to share it, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you're new to this channel and you want to see lots of great aquarium content just like this, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching.